Hello, friends, lovers, and enemies of the weather. Because right now the weather is awful in Ohio. One of the many reasons I will be returning to my parents' abode. So, um, if you know anything about me, which, like, maybe you should, but also maybe you shouldn't, then you would probably know, though, if you did know anything about me. I love poetry. I, like, really love poetry. Like pretty much all of my favorite living writers are poets. All my favorite writers ever are poets, with the exception of Hannah Moskowitz, which, I just keep telling her she's my favorite to feed her ego. So for April, which is National Poetry Month, every year I only read poetry. So like last year I must have read something crazy like 10, maybe 12, 14 books of poetry, mostly because I was reading through all of Jason Baldinger's work. And, like, he's an amazing poet, like, really talented. But this year, I, like, had already read through his work, and I could have maybe reread Sam Sax's work, but I wasn't going to do that because no thanks. And we had just had Sam Sachs, like, where I work. So what I did was I like read all of his poems before he arrived, so just in case I would be prepared, like show off the knowledge that like I have read all of your poems. Dumb shit. Anyways, so I read a nice pile. I read a nice pile of poetry. So I'm going to go through and sort of like give my honest opinions on these books of poetry, and hopefully it's enjoyable. If you have any questions or like want recommendations on like who you should read, hit me up. I have a lot of opinions about poetry and I know a lot of poets, so like I don't know, I feel like that adds a little bit of flavor, like when you know poets. And I'm also a poet. I also like wrote a poem every single day for April, and if you like, there's a link in the bottom because I've been getting published a lot because hashtag grind, hashtag want to be a writer, please, thank you. So like, you can, if you're curious, you can just read that, but like also you don't have to. But I also would be mad at myself if I didn't mention it. So, okay. I think I'm gonna go in reverse order of like what I read, because order doesn't matter. So let's start off with Rattle Nun by John Burroughs. John Burroughs, I have met. He is also the Beat Poet Laureate for Ohio, and like he runs like a small press in Ohio in the Cleveland area, and so like I've met him because I also have a friend who runs a small press and they know each other and blah 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 blah. So anyways, I had heard John read like a few months ago. No, more than that. Like, I don't know, August or something, maybe September. And I liked his reading, but I also was just like, something's not right. You know what I mean? Like about this man. I'll find this poem, this quote, because it really like made my whole insides churn. It's in his poem Unfounded. This is probably the worst poem I've ever heard in my whole life. And I've read a lot of bad poetry. I'll just read the stanza that I hate, and it makes me... Actually, there's two, but they're like kind of separated. So I'll read the first one, roll my eyes, and then read the second one and roll my eyes again. I imagine it's because she does not want to die, and the cutting makes her feel alive, or because she feels dead inside, or like hell. I can only speculate why, because she cannot tell. I imagine it's because she does not want to live, and the cutting makes her feel dead, or loved inside, or like hell. I can only speculate or expectorate why when I do not know. I'm obviously like not reading with the correct like timing and rhythm because his rhythm is so absolutely different from mine, like in what I use. I really hate when people who have not self-harmed try and talk about self-harm, because they talk about it in such a way that is like so stupid and hollow, and I hate it. It like feels gross. It like literally is slimy. And like that's what this poem is. And also like the poems were, for the most part, his poetry was like wordplay with no substance. So like there was more focus on making puns in some of the poems than there was on like, what are you trying to say? Is there anything real that you've ever experienced once? Which I know is harsh, but I also really don't like this guy on a personal level. But also, if you read these poems, you'd be like, ugh, vomit. Okay, so this one is called Christ, but it's like cry, S-T. I'm a messiah with emphasis on the first syllable, Christ, with a Y and no H. The first three letters capitalized. Mess, sigh, ugh. You get it? It's like all that. And no bag of chips. So I did give this book 2 out of 5 stars, I think. I believe I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, which is wonderful because only his friends have reviewed it on Goodreads, so they've all given it a 5 because they can't be honest. Don't read that. Don't waste your time. I ran into a similar problem with Nightshade and Daylight, written by Jack Belanti, who is also a Cleveland writer. He has a real lyrical quality to his poetry, and yet there is also no substance. It's like they say in season 2 of The Great British Bake Off, you're all style and no substance, and that does not a good poetry book make. Yeah, I don't recommend this. I also gave this a 2 out of 5 stars, and it is like so thin that I can't really say much about it. I just wouldn't recommend it. Not that I'm sure you could find it anywhere other than buying it from the poet in person. I also read Dog Songs by Mary Oliver because one of my students really loves Mary Oliver and highly recommended her. I had never read her before, and I think I picked it up literally because I liked the artwork, completely forgetting that I don't like dogs. Regardless, it was really good and really beautiful, and Mary Oliver like has this really like tight understanding of how to really express things, because she's not like overly wordy and flowery, but she's still like raw and real and analytical, and you really like get put into the poems that she's written. Like you are there, you are present in it with her, which I think is a really powerful quality that not that many poets have. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend it if you like dogs, because I do not like dogs, but I would be open to reading her other poetry books that are not about an animal that I don't enjoy. Then we have Raga for What Comes Next, written by my friend Diane Borsnick. Diane is really nice, but I didn't like love these poems. It's just kind of like middle of the road for me. Like the lyricism isn't particularly poignant, and additionally, like some poems were about things, but most of them weren't. You get what I'm saying? Like I keep coming back to this theme where it's like if the poem's not about anything, why bother writing it? Or at least if like your reader can't get anything of substance from the words that you've put on the page, then like you're not doing a good job. I did have a favorite poem in this one that I dog-eared the thing. So let me read this one to you. This Can't Be Oklahoma, which is based off of, she wrote it about a poem. No, She wrote it about a painting. This can't be Oklahoma. Not this farm, so desolate, so sterile, so barren of cow. This can't be Oklahoma, where it's possible to see more cows in one day than in one's entire life outside of Oklahoma. Coffee-colored, nut-brown cows. Cows in plenitude, cows ubiquitous. This can't be Oklahoma, and this can't be April, when the cattle have calved and the blade of viridescent grass is called into play to... I'm literally having a stroke. To pasture the cows, to nourish the cows, to cradle the cows when they tire of eating and fold their legs. There's too much undisturbed grass for April. No, this can't be Oklahoma, not these whitewashed out buildings, surely filled with pale ambient light and the petricolor of the morning's rain, dust sifting into empty corners. No bellows, no snorts, no stamping hooves inhabit here. This place, so unbovine, can't be Oklahoma. I love it. I love this poem. It just, like, really speaks to me about Ohio. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like Ohio. And also, I read it in April. So, overall, I gave this 3 out of 5 stars because it was really middle of the road, and there were poems that I really enjoyed, but there was also a lot that I was like, I either don't care or it's really not grabbing me. King. Ugh, I just love this man. Allen Ginsberg, I don't know what it is about him that I feel like we are the same, or that just like, yeah, like we have the same soul, but we obviously don't, but it feels like we do. King. Ugh, I just love this man. Allen Ginsberg, I don't know what it is about him that I feel like we are the same, or that just like, yeah, like we have the same soul, but we obviously don't, but it feels like we do. This book is about his mother, Naomi Ginsberg. She had very likely what would be schizoaffective disorder, which is bipolar disorder with elements of schizophrenia and psychosis. Allen has just so much guilt about this. I think especially because he is the younger of his siblings. Like, he's got an older brother, well, had an older brother. They're both long gone. But Allen, he just, like, has a lot of guilt about it. And also, like, when his mom passed, in Judaism, like, you try to bury the person as fast as possible unless you are my mother. I could have some thoughts on that. But you're supposed to bury the person as fast as possible. I think it has to do with, like, they didn't have embalming techniques and stuff back in the day. But Allen was on the West Coast, and by the time he got the news, there was no time for him to come back to the East Coast where his mom was to be buried. And I don't know if he felt guilt about this, but this like really put me through it for a few days. But his mom didn't get to have like the correct like last rites that Jewish people do. Like, there weren't enough people at her funeral for a minyan, which is like you need 10 people to do certain prayers because they're supposed to be done in community. And that just like really got to me because it's really sad. And I think like he doesn't say it outright, but there's really a lot of like evidence that he feels so much guilt about her final years of her life, which was also when he was starting to have like just a ton of success as a poet, and also like when it came to her funeral. So he wrote Kaddish, which is like a 3-part poem, I believe. No, just kidding. It is a 5-part poem that he finalized in 1959 that is basically like about and for his mother. But then also the rest of the collection is pretty much about his mom. and it's really like beautiful and sad, and I feel like this is where Allen Ginsberg was the most himself. Because even though Hal is like gorgeous, some of it does feel really performative, and like almost too much of it was written through drug use to feel as like honest as Kaddish does. I gotta say that my favorite poem in this is Death to Van Gogh's Ear. I'm not gonna read this to you because Ginsberg writes really long poems. And so it's hard to really give you like a sample, but I did give this 5 out of 5 stars. I think everyone should read this. I think everyone should read it multiple times. This is not my first time reading some of these poems, so I just love it. He is an angel. Standard Loneliness Package, which I found at the Strand in New York. And fun for me, Sam Sachs wrote a little blurb on the back of it. But I picked it up because not only does it look like a sugar packet, which I was like gagging over, but it also is $3. And I was like, I need free books. Well, not free, but cheap. I need affordable books, you know what I mean? I don't even know what I gave this. I think I didn't even really like it that much. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. So let's get into that. This is basically Michael J. Seidlinger, writing poems to a ton of people that he has fucked over in his life and being like, I'm so sorry, and I am sorry that we have lost touch. And a lot of it is him taking ownership for like those fuck ups. But there was a really fucking awful part where he like talked about doing something really like awful and bad to a dog that like I will never recover from having read. The dog didn't die, but it was really bad. So prepare yourself if you do read this. I'm also just not that much of a fan of like these kind of closure poems. Or like apology poems. I don't even know what you would call them, but I'm like not wild about it. I think that it's just sort of like a form that ends up not even being the finished product that you're even trying to achieve in the first place. I did give this a 3 out of 5. So if you can find it for cheap, might as well. Then I read Unrelated Individuals Forming a Group Waiting to Cross by Mark Yakich. I must have gotten this book at Caliban Books. I love that place. I had a lot of mixed feelings about this book because I either really did not like the poems or I really enjoyed them. There's a theme in this book of this invisible man, and it's really beautiful. So let me read for you the poem, The Invisible Man's Daughter. The invisible man, it turns out, had a daughter. She was 12 when I was 13, and would come by our house after school on Thursdays. I thought she was a happy girl until one Thursday. She stood over me in my treehouse and said, "You are more precious to me than my eyes." Caught without a plan, I walked right in. "Has your father already disappeared?" I asked. "Yes," she said, while bicycling and giving the trees names. "He died, and now the ground I walk on is very dusty." I moved to hold her hand, but could feel nothing. Little did I know, this was the plan. It's like so good because it just like reveals little by little, and then by the time you read the last line, it is like it paints a completely different color over the image that has been conjured. So I really love that. That's my favorite kind of everything, is like a nice little Shyamalan twist at the end of a poem or a book or a movie, but like not directed by Shyamalan, because I saw Avatar and it was bad. This book is fine. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. And I don't think I would have bought it and read it if I didn't get it for cheap. This brings me to the last book, aka the first book that I read for National Poetry Month. National Poetry Month? Yes, that's what April is. So I read Mind Breaths by Allen Ginsberg. I think that Ginsberg really has like two sort of phases to his work. And that might be because I've never really read anything that he wrote before he entered college. So I think that there's like Columbia through his mother passing maybe a few years after that. And then there is like Alan pretending that he's not a curmudgeon-y part of the establishment. That's where Mind Breaths takes place. I do love him, but there's just less oomph. And I think that's like a thing that happens as you get older, is that like you really lose your chutzpah and you stop being an interesting individual, which is like so sad. Actually, that's not true. I know a lot of quirky old people, but I think Alan was trying to be that quirky old person without actually effectively being that. He also like writes a lot about gay sex in a way that like is important, but at the same time, I think I just don't like reading about sex. I just think I don't like it. Especially because his details tend to be really graphic, and I think like I need things to be more abstract for them to be beautiful. But there's a lot more about the poem Contest of Bards is really interesting, and I like low-key haven't stopped thinking about it and like kind of want to turn it into a book. It's very interesting. I also just like, what I love about early Ginsberg is the Americana in his work. As he gets older, he gets much more interested in Eastern religion and meditation in a way that doesn't interest me. I don't know what it is. Maybe I'll like get to a point later in life when I'm closer to like 30 where it makes sense to me, but like right now where I'm at resonates so much more with his earlier works because like we were like kind of in the same headspace in a lot of ways. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. Mind Breaths is good, but if you're gonna only read one of the Ginsberg poetry books that I am talking about, you should read Kaddish, and if you're going to only read one ever, you should read Howl. But I think the order would go Howl, Kaddish, and then probably Journals. This is what I read. Mostly they are fine. I didn't really read any standout poetry books this April, which is disappointing, because I love poetry, and I wonder if it's like the more I read, the more refined I get in my taste. But then I also wonder why no one else's taste is like mine. So am I doing something wrong? Or am I just correct? Things to think about, things to consider. I have much better recommendations for poetry books that I did not read in April. So if you're interested in that, just like leave a comment or whatever. Like I previously mentioned, I've been getting published a lot, and that is down below in the description. You can find my most recent piece that I wrote. You can find my social media. It would be awesome if you gave me a subscribe here. I'm like so close to 400, which is like crazy. I'm literally gonna go kill my cat because he is ripping out his fur. You do not know struggle until you have had a cat with obsessive compulsive disorder, diagnosed by his vet. So thank you so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe, leave a like, follow my other stuff, and I will see you next time. Mamma mia, here I go again.